just finished my first week of raiding, and I thought I'd kind of touch base and go back over the Prot Paladin talent tree and where you could potentially move some points around in the tree. So right here, what I have is kind of the typical main tank Prot Pally build that you'll see if you look up on Wowhead and most guides on YouTube. Another thing that I kind of wish I'd had explained to me with this new talent tree when I wasn't that familiar with it was what are the big talents you need to pick up, and what are the kind of talents that you're just putting 5 out of 5 in to get to the next level of the talent tree. So I'll reset my talents here and I'll go through it. First level of the Prot tree, we're gonna go 5 out of 5 Divine Strength. It's pretty obvious, strength is your best stat to have, and having an extra 15% is an easy no-brainer. I have seen there's a guy in my Pug Black Temple raid who had 5 out of 5 into Divinity, and on the surface it kind of seems good, but it's really not. So if you had 5% increased healing done to you, I mean, if you have to think, pretty much all healers are going to be over healing you already for anywhere from 20 to 40%. So that extra 5% isn't really going to do much. And I can't really think of too many situations, at least in pre-patch, of where an extra 5% healing would kind of prevent a raid wipe. So we're going to skip that for now. On the next level, no-brainer again, 5 out of 5 into Anticipation. It's just 5% dodge, so that's more hard avoidance. The third level, we take 5 out of 5 Toughness for that extra 10% armor value, and 3 out of 3 Righteous Fury for that flat 6% damage reduction. To the left of Righteous Fury, we get to our first couple of talents where there is some flexibility of whether or not we choose to get it. So real quickly, Divine Sacrifice is an amazing raid cooldown to have, and it's going to be probably a pretty big deal at 80 when we do some of the harder raid bosses. But basically what it does is it gives, for 6 seconds, your entire raid takes 20% reduced damage, as well as for 10 seconds, 30% of all damage taken is redirected to the Paladin. So it sounds really good, but there just really isn't a boss in the TBC raids right now that you could really justify taking this talent. Even for an off tank, I think there's just really no reason to have it. So we're going to skip that for now. 3 out of 3 into Improved Devotion Aura, and this is a very important talent to have for that raid-wide armor bonus that you give, as well as improving the healing done to everyone in your raid by 6%. At the same time, though, if you're running 2 Prot Paladins, you don't need to put 3 talent points into this if the other Prot Paladin is covering that. So another talent that is imperative for all Prot Paladins to take is Blessing of Sanctuary. Now this is a great blessing by itself, giving you another 3% damage reduction, but it also gives you access to Holy Shield, Avenger's Shield, and Shield of the Templar. To the right of Blessing of Sanctuary is Reckoning. Now Reckoning is my personal favorite talent to take. Your melee is going to do a ton of your DPS per second, and this just feels really good when it procs. So I'd recommend getting at least 3 into Reckoning, but I personally am going to take 5 for now. 3 out of 3 into one-hand weapon specialization. This gives us an increase to all of our damage we deal by 10%, so this is massive. We also pick up 2 out of 2 into Sacred Duty. 1 point in Holy Shield. This is a main staple of all Prot Paladins. An interesting change, though, is that it now lasts for 10 seconds instead of 8. So if you're trying to maximize your mitigation and have 100% uptime on Holy Shield, it's a lot easier to do than it was in TBC. To the right, we have our Ardent Defender, 3 out of 3. This talent is completely broken. It's our cheat death, so always take 3 out of 3 in Ardent Defender. We also have Spiritual Attunement. So most guys will tell you just to go 1 out of 2 in this. I personally only do 1 out of 2 in Spiritual Attunement, but if you're an off tank, especially if you're having trouble keeping up mana on trash and your duty to your raid is to tank trash, I'm not going to knock you for taking 2 out of 2 Spiritual Attunement, especially in something like BT. On a lot of those bosses, I found myself having to take mana pots halfway through the fight, especially if you're pre-potting with an Iron Shield potion and you're fairly geared, you just have so much mitigation already that you're not taking enough damage to really make your mana back. So don't be afraid to go 2 out of 2 in this, but I'm just going to stay at 1 for now. We take 3 out of 3 into Redoubt and 3 out of 3 into Combat Expertise. And I guess while we're at Combat Expertise, I'll talk a little bit about Expertise and why it's very important to prot Paladins, and it's probably kind of overlooked by a lot of new Pallies. So this is just the top 100 prot Paladins on Brutalis. I think Brutalis is kind of a good example to look at what type of gear people are wearing, because it's basically a tank and spank now in pre-patch, so you can really see like what are people wearing to maximize their DPS on bosses. And you'll see a lot of prot pallies with the shard, the sliver, just anything that kind of improves your expertise. And kind of at first glance, you might be thinking, all right, so these are the top 100 pallies. You know, they're kind of psycho parse brains, but they're really not. And expertise is not only an offensive stat, it's also a defensive stat, because if you don't have any expertise, there's a pretty good chance that the boss is just going to be parry-aced for a pretty sizable percentage of the fight, and it's just going to make healing you even harder to do. So back to the talent tree. 3 out of 3 into Touched by the Light. This is another imperative talent that you have to take. Convert 60% of your strength into spell power. And this is also the reason why strength is now our main stat and we don't gear for spell power anymore. To the right of that, we take Avenger's Shield, another staple of all prot paladins, and it's actually reworked to be an insta-cast now, so it doesn't feel awkward anymore casting this. I know in TBC, a lot of us pallies, we would kind of like sneak into the Rat Paladins group to get like a Sankora carrier, and that'd allow us to, you know, change our talents around and pick up Avenger's Shield. And it just felt really awkward, like kind of casting it while taking a boss and just getting hit. So Avenger's Shield doesn't suck anymore. 3 out of 3, Shield of the Templar. This is another easy talent to pick up. It gives you another 3% damage reduction, and it turns your Avenger's Shield into kind of like a interrupt or a silence. To the right of that, I'm going to put 2 out of 2 into Judgment of the Just. Now, this is a very important debuff to bring to your raid. It reduces the melee attack speed of the boss by 20%. So it's basically like a improved Thunderclap. But at the same time, by no means do you actually need to put 2 points into this. Now, what I mean by that is that if we go to our Wrath Raid comp, we hover over 20% attack speed reduction. This is brought by all 4 tanks to the raid. So why am I still speccing into this? Well, we're only going to run 2 tanks in phase 1 of Wrath, and our other tank is going to off-spec DPS, and he's going to pretty much be DPS on pretty much all the bosses where you don't need 2 tanks. The other thing is, I had, you know, the little week where it shows like boss debuffs and TBC, and sometimes it is a nightmare trying to get like your DPS warriors, you know, Thunderclap, Demo Shout, and even worse, just trying to get hunters to Scorpion Sting. So if I can kind of pick up any of those debuffs as a tank and I have no threat issues, I don't really mind wasting an extra global. And this isn't even wasting a global. This is just whenever you judge. So it's already part of your rotation. It's going to be very easy to have 100% uptime on this, and it's a great debuff to have. So I am going to take this. Last but not least, we pick up Hammer of the Righteous. Now this is our new hammer, and this is a very important ability to our rotation. If you're trying to maximize your DPS as prot, you're going to be using this off cooldown. It's nuts. It's also the reason why we now use high attack power weapons, because it scales with weapon damage. Once we finish with the prot tree, we're going to head all the way over to the ret tree and pick up 5 out of 5 deflection. This gives us another flat 5% avoidance, as well as gives us access to improved judgment. And this is just the same as TBC, so it's going to help us judge more often. Now, we have 1 point left, And I think this is a good time to start talking about flexibility in our points and what we can do. Alright, I'm going to take a screenshot of our current talents and kind of show you where we have flexibility with what we choose to do with our points. So pretty much the most obvious spot and probably the best place to put any final talent points is to this talent, and this is called Seals of the Pure. For each point we put into this, you get an extra 3% damage on your Seal of Vengeance, so 5 out of 5 would give you 15% extra damage, and that's going to be a really good talent. It's very consistent. Your Seal of Vengeance is going to be a pretty large source of damage for you, so just all in all, a great talent. Pretty much a similar way to put points is your Reckoning, and this is another damage talent. I personally like Reckoning over Seals of the Pure just because I think this is a little bit more fun. It feels really good when this procs, and if we didn't go over it earlier, the proc is just that you get an extra weapon swing on your next 4 swings. It's a really fun talent to have, but if you're purely going for parsing, I'd say go with more talent points into Seals of the Pure, because Reckoning is a very low proc chance, and if you're going for that parse, you're basically kind of going for that one outlier attempt. So say for instance you only have 3 out of 5 in Reckoning, but you get really lucky in that fight and you just have like some crazy like 40% uptime on Reckoning. That's completely possible to happen, even if it's unlikely. Next, we have our Spiritual Attunement, and once again, do not feel bad about putting 2 out of 2 into this. I know a ton of people in the Pally Discord are saying you will never need this. Like, I just don't think it's that big of a deal. It's free mana. If you're not main tanking a boss, you're gonna need some way to get your mana back. Next, we have our boss debuff. Apologize for the terrible circle. And this is just, if you have another tank in your raid who covers this debuff and they're good about their uptime on it, there's no reason for you to have this. The same goes for your 3 out of 3 Devotion Aura. This is specifically if you're running with 2 Prot Paladins. Just communicate with them. There's no reason that both of y'all should be spending 3 talent points in this. And then, last but not least, I guess you could choose to put points into your Divine Sack. And I guess, if you're still like hard stuck on bosses in pre-patch, which I hope you're not, this is just a good raid cooldown to have, and I guess I can give you some practice on using it in Wrath. And then we have a little honorable mention, which is Improved Blessing of Might. So your Ret Paladin is most likely going to pick this up. Even if your Ret Paladin doesn't pick this up, you're probably going to have a warrior who is going to battle shout. But in some situations, warriors will just not want to battle shout. They'll say, it costs rage, I have to do it mid-fight. In that case, it's probably a raid-wide DPS increase just to pick this up if you don't have a ret in a raid with this. So let's go into how that would actually look like on our talent tree. So the variation in different Prot Pally talent specs is pretty much going to come from how many points you decide to put in Reckoning and Seals of the Pure. So for instance, if you wanted to pick up any of these flex talents, I guess the most easiest example would be if you wanted an extra point in Spiritual Attunement, you could simply just take 1 point out of Reckoning and put it into Spiritual Attunement. Vice versa, you could also take out 1 point of Seals of the Pure and move it into there. If you have another tank in your raid that brings the 20% melee debuff, you could take 2 points out of that, put 1 in Spiritual Attunement and 1 into Seals of the Pure. You could just take 2 points out of that and put 2 into Seals of the Pure. So this build that we have right now is probably the most offensive Prot Pally build there is. You have 5 out of 5 in Reckoning and the max amount of points into Seals of the Pure. You can't really justify taking 2 points out of Improved Judgment and putting them over here, just because this is going to be more DPS than those final 2 points into Seals of the Pure. So the same thing applies to if you want to pick up a raid sack. You just take your 3 points out of Seals of the Pure, move them over into your Divine Guardian and Divine Sack. If you wanted to keep Seals of the Pure, you could take your points out of Reckoning, put them back in. If you want the boss debuff, same thing. You take points out of Seals of the Pure, move them to Judgment of the Just. You could get rid of Reckoning, pick up Seals of the Pure. You could go 3 into Reckoning. But yeah, I hope this cleared up any confusion about the Prot Valley tree and helped you guys find the right talent spec for your raid.